Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of Double Down, the live news and affairs programme that likes to put people first. It's the 19th of November 2020. We're broadcasting from Dundalk and Dublin, and I am your host, Finbar Markey. We have what I hope will be a revealing and at times an inspiring show for you tonight. We're joined by Antoinette Keegan and Maris McHugh, both of whom lost loved ones in the Stardust Fire in 1981. We're going to talk to both guys tonight about their experiences on that night and the days afterwards, but also we're going to look at the campaign, 40-year campaign that has culminated in, first of all, an award for the Keegan family, the Mother Jones Award, but also has culminated in what they've always wanted, a proper inquest into the Stardust Fire of 1981. We're also going to be joined by the irrepressible Fintan Dunne, who's going to give us an update on the bulldozing of the grounds of a mother and baby home this week, and his concerns that the bulldozing will have destroyed evidence that could be used into the future, but as important, that the bulldozing may have destroyed and upset the bodies of many babies that could be buried there. So we're going to talk to Fintan about that. But before I turn to our guests, I think it has started, folks. The mudslinging has started, the anger has started, and the overconfidence has started. I'm talking about the debate that is about to start over the next few months and even year in terms of the pro and the anti-vaccine debate with regards to COVID-19. The show tonight, I'm not going to try to convince you of either argument in terms of vaccines. But what I am going to do is I'm going to try just to talk about one or two scandals with regards to pharmaceutical companies over the last 10 to 15 years. And I'm going to suggest to everybody involved in the debates into the future that we are not naive when we go into looking at these issues, and that we seek information ourselves, and that we don't, without question, trust any side. On the one hand, we're going to have people saying that vaccines and pharmaceutical companies are trying to wipe us all out. On the other side, arguments are going to be made that they are totally infallible and always morally correct. But we're going to look at two scandals today that happened over the last 15 years that might make us at least throw a more critical eye onto pharmaceutical companies, especially in these times. The reason I'm actually raising this is, and the reason I took an interest in this subject matter quite a long time ago, was that about 10 years ago when I was doing my PhD, my college, DKIT, sent me off to Paris to an international conference of geriatrics and gerontology. And I was put up in a fancy hotel in Paris. I have to let you know, I had no money in my pocket at the time. I think I went over with 75 euros. But I was put up in this fancy hotel where World Health Organization officials were also staying for this conference. And on the second evening, I got an elevator up to my room and I met a gentleman, an Israeli gentleman, who was actually high up in the World Health Organization in Southeast Asia. And we ended up linking in and having coffee and things like that. And he invited me to go for coffee the following day. And me being a young enough fella doing a PhD, I thought, hey, I seem to be in with the clique here. I might as well go along and see what this is about and what the World Health Organization is about. It was at the time of the H1N1 virus. And I decided I better have something to talk about with this guy. So I got a copy of an English newspaper, The Times, and the headline on the newspaper on that morning was, WHO announces World Vaccination Program. So I thought, I'll have a chat to this guy about this, something to talk about. And when I showed him the newspaper, he laughed in a kind of an all-knowing way. And he said to me that the pharmaceutical companies have won. And he explained to me that H1N1, the World Health Organization had decided a year beforehand that there was no need for a vaccination program. The actual virus had spread throughout the population so much that a vaccination program would be a waste of money. And he was essentially telling me now that they won. Their lobbying over that year got what they wanted, and there was going to be a H1N1 world vaccination program. So from there, this gentleman sent me videos and emails and links about lots of pharmaceutical companies and the corruption therein. And in particular, at the time, Pfizer was one of the main pharmaceutical companies that he told me about. This evening, I want to talk about two particular drugs that have nothing to do with vaccines. One is a diabetes drug, one was an arthritic drug to treat arthritis and inflammation. And both of these drugs ended up killing thousands upon thousands of people. But the producers, GlaxoSmithKline and Merck, respectively, knew before they put it on the shelves that thousands of people would die. But they made a calculation that they would actually, even after paying fines and being sued, they would make profits from these drugs. So let's have a look at these drugs for a minute. The first drug was called Avandia, and the US Department of Justice in 2007 said of Avandia, global healthcare giant GlaxoSmithKline agreed to plead guilty to and to pay $3 billion to resolve its criminal and civil liability arising from the company's unlawful promotion of certain prescription drugs, its failure to report certain safety data, and that's the key issue here, and its civil liability for alleged false price reporting. The resolution was the largest healthcare fraud settlement in US history and the largest payment ever by a drug company. Now, at the time, that payment and that case was looking at a number of different drugs. Avandia in 1 year sold 3 billion euros in terms of sales of the actual drug itself. And so that was on the market for over 7, nearly 8 years without being listed as a dangerous drug in any way. So you can see the profits that were made. So they knew from the beginning as many as 100,000 heart attacks, strokes, deaths, and cases of heart failure in the US alone may be directly attributed to Avandia since the drug was launched in 1999. In 2001, at the FDA's request, GlaxoSmithKline were commissioned to conduct a 6-year study to examine the impact of Avandia on people's hearts. And they didn't carry it out properly. They didn't follow the methodology at all. And that comes from the FDA as well. In 2006, as I said, they reported 3 billion worth of sales in 1 year. In 2007, Dr. Stephen Nissen, chief cardiologist at the Cleveland Clinic, conducts analysis of 42 clinical trials of Avandia. He and his co-author, Kathy Wolski, published in the New England Journal that showed that Avandia increased risks of heart attack by 43%. It remained on the market. Avandia did everything to stop that report coming out. In November the 14th, 2007, the FDA required strong warning labels for Avandia, but it wasn't taken off the market. In the United States now, you can still access Avandia, but there's only about 3,000 users compared to the hundreds of thousands throughout the noughties, as they call it. It wasn't taken off the market in the EU until 2010. So even though we knew globally that Avandia was killing thousands upon thousands of people, it remained on the market and available without any warnings in the EU until 2010. What does that say about trustworthiness? What does that say about when we try to back up and support modern medicine and pharmacy? When we have cases like this, it casts doubt upon everything. The next, before we move on to the next drug, Stephen, could you play that clip from the 2007 Senate hearing on Avandia for us, please?
The issue with Avandia, like so many other drugs, is that it was approved without the full knowledge of all the impacts it might have. This is not unusual because many drugs need to be watched carefully after they're approved. But there's been a pressure at FDA to get drugs approved as quickly as possible. In fact, we even have user fees to help FDA have more resources to get those drugs approved. The question that I'm looking at is the post-marketing surveillance of this drug as it reflects post-marketing surveillance of other drugs. This particular drug was approved in 1999. And your reviewer at the FDA did, as I mentioned in my opening statements, exactly what he should do. He looked at the effectiveness, whether it lowers blood sugar, and he found that there was enough clinical evidence to show that it did. But he was concerned about the possibility of increased heart attacks, strokes, because of some evidence that he saw in the data, and suggested that there be a post-marketing surveillance of that issue. And so that 1999, we had this opportunity for FDA to make sure that the post-marketing study was being done. But it wasn't done. And then later in 2000 and 2003, you mentioned in your statement you welcomed the input from those who have concerns. Well, FDA got input from people who had concerns. Dr. Busey wrote to FDA to express his concern about Avandia's potential cardiovascular risks. And he urged the FDA to conduct a cardiovascular safety trial in high-risk populations. And still nothing was done. In February 2003, the World Health Organization issued a warning of potential cardiac risks associated with Avandia's class of drugs. And this was another opportunity for FDA to insist that a post-market study be done by the manufacturer on this potential danger, and nothing was done. And not until we got this report in the New England Journal of Medicine has there been this great concern expressed in the public.
Okay. So when that senator was actually talking, he was talking to a member of the FDA that had just given evidence. The FDA is the Federal Drug Agency in the United States. They're the guys that are supposed to check to make sure all these pharmaceutical products are safe. It's clear from the investigation that it's not just the pharmaceutical companies that were and are at fault in these cases. It's clear that also the FDA and the agencies that are supposed to overlook and have oversight on these products were not doing their job. One of the reasons is that the FDA do not test products. They send test methodologies and requirements to the pharmaceutical companies who were supposed to do the testing themselves and send the results back. And again, when we look at incidents like this, we can see that if it's left to the pharmaceutical companies on their own, at times they may not be as honest as they possibly could be. The second drug we're looking at, and we'll briefly get through this, is a drug called Vioxx, which was brought out for people with arthritis. Scientists from the pharmaceutical company giant Merck skewed the results of a clinical trial in favor of the arthritis drug to hide evidence that the drug increased patients' risks of heart attacks. To increase the likelihood of FDA approval for its anti-inflammatory and arthritis drug, the giant Merck used flawed methods biased towards predetermined results to exaggerate the drug's effects. Vioxx increased the likelihood of a heart attack or a stroke by 400%. It was eventually taken off the market, but not before 55,000 people in the United States died from taking this drug. Remember, again, this is quite recently, this was up in 2010, 2011. Another problem that arose was, and listen to this, it's pretty stark. Merck's manipulation of the science around Vioxx included a pattern of ghostwriting of scientific articles. Internal documents reveal that in 16 out of 20 papers reporting clinical trials on Vioxx, a Merck employee was named initially on the papers, but when the papers or science was then published, they changed the names to people who were not connected directly with Merck. So you can see that there was massive manipulation of data, and that these people knew that thousands upon thousands of people would die. These guys are still in their jobs. These companies are still producing in the same fashion. So I'm not going to get into the anti and pro-vax debate, but what I am going to ask people to do is to have a healthy critical eye when it comes to all medical and all pharmaceutical issues like this into the future. Do your research and don't be naive enough to believe that anybody is infallible. Okay, that's all I'm going to say in that subject matter. We're joined this evening, and I am honoured, and I mean this, I am honoured to be joined tonight by Antoinette Keegan and Maris Mayhew. Both Antoinette and Maris lost loved ones in the Stardust Fire disaster in 1981. Antoinette lost her two sisters, Mary and Martina, and Maris lost his daughter. Thanks for joining me, first of all, guys. The way we're going to operate this is we didn't know that Maris was coming in until a few hours ago. So Maris is actually in the room with Antoinette at the moment. And as we move over and back, Antoinette will move the camera over to Maris and back as needs be. I hope it doesn't put anybody off too much. Antoinette, I want to open up, first of all, thanking you and Maris for coming on tonight.
Well, thank you very much for having us on.
Yeah, well, I'm really honoured, and I have to say that. And I think that when people hear your story and the 40-year campaign, they're going to be honoured to be able to listen to you tonight as well. Can we start off by saying the Mother Jones Award? It's just come out in the papers, Antoinette, that you've been awarded the Mother Jones Award. What is that all about?
It's basically about the campaign that my father, my dad and my ma carried through the last 40 years. My dad passed away in December 1986, and he fought it right up to the end till his death. And likewise, when he passed away, my mother took over, and I told her, "Ma, stop. Like, the Stardust at the killing me 2 sisters, Mary and Martina. It's not the killing me dad. I said, and I'll kill you." And she said, "I'll never give up. I want to find out what happened to my 2 beautiful daughters." And she said, "Your dad died as a consequence of the Stardust as well." And she actually fought tooth and nail right up to the last breath of her body in July, 14th of July. She wanted so much to know when the inquest was getting opened, and literally by her bedside while she was sick, I told a little white lie. Well, actually wasn't a little white lie, because I told her it was going to happen very soon. And it happened 3 weeks after my mother passed away. That was announced, right, the inquest was getting opened into the 48 deaths of the Stardust victims. So when I told my mother, right, that she had won the award down in Cork, she was ecstatic. She was delighted that it kind of gave her like a lift, even though she was sick. It gave her a lift that she was looking forward to going off for the weekend, because the Mother Jones Foundation was putting us up right in the Malvern Hotel, and consequently speaking, right, it was my mother and me going, Eugene Kelly, who recently passed away as well, and his partner Martha Madden, and Morris is sitting beside me, him and his wife was going as well. They lost their only child. So we were all looking forward to going down there last summer for the summer camp, and I was going to do a speech like on the award that my ma was at again and everything else, right, for all our efforts and hard work that she had put in all her life. Like, she was 84 when she passed away, but she was only 40 like when the Stardust happened. But she would have been a bit older than so. She was 44. But like, half of her life was spent fighting for justice and truth for the 48 victims, and she never gave up. So it's an honour to be, like, for the Keegan family to be awarded with this. It really is. It's an honour. We're like ecstatic and overwhelmed, speechless at first.
Yeah, and just for any viewers who don't know, Mother Jones was a woman who emigrated from Cork at a very young age over to the United States and ended up in Chicago. She lost her entire family, her children and her husband, to yellow fever. She got over that and she started her own drapery business in Chicago. She lost that in the Great Fire of Chicago. As what some would term an old woman, she began campaigning about poverty, about child labour, and she became a real figurehead for campaigning and resistance and for justice in the United States. And there is an award called the Mother Jones Award, and I think the Keegan family essentially have won that award this year, and it's a great thing to get that recognition after 40 years of campaigning. Antoinette, I'm going to ask you some questions now that I have a reticence about asking, but at the same time, I think the whole story is necessary. Can you let me know what happened on the night that you and Mary and Martina and John, your brother, who was supposed to go but didn't go, what happened that night when you went to the Stardust?
Well, first of all, before we even left our home, my father kept saying it's Friday the 13th, and played me his don't go. And like I said, Dad, we'll be okay, we'll be okay. Like, I was 18, Mary was 19, Martina was 16, John was 17. And my dad just said, look, he said, I can't, like he was in the territorial years ago, right, and he done a parachute jump. And on Friday the 13th, when he jumped out of the parachute, right, he actually broke his limbs in 13 different places. And I always remember, like, he used to kind of quote that, like, Friday the 13th is not a good day, it's unlucky. And I just said, you're superstitious, right, we'll be okay. But myself, Mary and Martina, we made our way down to the Stardust. My brother John went over to his friends. Mary actually went up with her friend, Mary Kenny, that lived around the corner from here. And I went up to my friend Helen with my sister Martina, and she was to meet her boyfriend, David Martin, up there. And like what we had to do was we had to kind of separate ourselves, because as you're going into the Stardust, right, if you're in the same group, they'd refuse a group of people. So what we done was, like, I'd go in first with Martina and my friend, and Mary would be behind, and then, like, once we got in, then we were all in there together. But that particular night, my brother John, we couldn't see him anywhere, but he had been refused. He was told that he was too young, so he didn't get in, and he actually went home. But on the night, like, as we went in, our bags were searched, and we nothing in our bags. We paid our £3 in. The £3 was for the admission fee in to the Stardust, and also for, like, our dinner or our lunch. Like, it could have been chicken and chips, or that particular night was sausage and chips. So, like, we got in and we got seated over at the North alcove. As we went in, we noticed that the West alcove was closed off, and found it very, very strange that that was actually closed off, because on any other particular night that we've been, like, in the Stardust, right, that would never be closed. It was always open. The West alcove would be open. And because there was a K-Tel competition on this particular night, we thought, like, that, like, the place was going to be packed, which everyone was going. There were weeks and weeks prior to the Stardust this disco competition. People were talking about what they were going to wear, and, like, what time they're going to be there, and who's going, and everything else. So found it very strange that the West alcove was closed off. But anyway, we got to the seats in the North alcove, and this particular night we said we wouldn't put our coats and bags in, because, like, there's going to be a queue for getting out, like, getting your coat and bag. So we decided we'd leave them at the seats where we were sitting. So we got in, and we were all sitting down, and went to the bar, got a glass of harp. I was on drinking glass. Mary didn't drink, Martina didn't drink, and Mary's friend didn't drink, and my friend did drink. So the bar was right beside us, and then, like, the stage was adjacent to us. So literally everything was on our sides, like the toilets and all was all beside us. So we had a drink, and then the music came on, everyone got up and danced, and then the disco competition kicked off, and the dancers got up on the floor, and they were dancing away. Everything was going great. When the competition was over, the music came back on, and everybody was up on the floor dancing. Then the winners was announced, and after they were announced, then people got back on the floor. But as we got back on the floor, I noticed, like, smoke coming across the ceiling, and I thought it was the DJ after letting off special effects. And when my friend said, "Look over there," and I looked over, she said, "There's a small fire over there on the seat." Now, when I looked over, it was only a small fire. And then the DJ made the announcement, right, for everyone to stay calm. Right, it's under control, stay calm. The next announcement was made then, right, and it was for everyone to make their way to the nearest exit.
Okay, take your time, Antoinette. If there's any time that you want to stop, just let me know.
And the next thing we knew, right, the fire was coming down on top of us. It was lashing down, right, and it was thick black smoke coming across the room. Couldn't breathe, and the heat was immense. It was just horrible. It was like being in hell. And
Just take a breath.
As people was trying to get out, and we were trying to get out, we were getting up to the ground, and there was people trampling on top of us. And then you could see, right, there was no exit opening, and the fire was coming down on top of us. And as that happened, right, my last words was, "Oh, God help us," and then I didn't remember it after I was knocked out. And then I came around in a different atmosphere. I was able to breathe, and I kept screaming, "Where's my sisters, where's my sisters, where's Mary, where's Martina?" An ambulance man came up to me and told me they had to get in the ambulance, that everybody was in. They're all gone to the hospital. And I said, "Oh, I need to see my sisters." He said, "They're all out, everyone's out." I didn't know that my two sisters were there, because I went back in to try and get them. because I told me dad I looked dancing, and I felt I didn't look dancing, but I ended up going to all different hospitals, and each time I got to the hospital, like I was in the ambulance, the last one getting in, and like all across the ambulance, right on both sides, was loads of people sitting crammed in the ambulance. And I always remember a girl that was sitting on this side of me, on my right hand side. I had just flopped down onto my right hand shoulder. And it stayed that way all the way into the hospital. Because every time I went to a different hospital, the porters was outside doing that, were full. And I ended up going over to the Fortis Hospital, Dr. Stevens' hospital. And I was there for 2.5 weeks. And then I found out that my sister's, Mary and Martina, had been killed off a priest.
Okay. And you were in hospital for a few days. And you told me when I was talking to you over the last few evenings that you were actually afraid to see your mother and father at that time because you felt a guilt, or you felt that you didn't come home with Mary and Martina.
Yeah, but when my mum and dad came up and they actually passed me bed, they couldn't recognise me. And when they did come out to me, I was afraid. Like they say, I said, "How's Mary and Martina?" And they said, "Oh, they're grand, they're grand." And I said, "Oh, great." I said, "What hospital are you in?" She said, "The mater and the maid. Mary's in the mater, Martina's in the maid." And I said, "Yeah, okay." And my mother says, "Yeah, Mary only has a few little marks on her leg and Martina has a few on her arm. But they're grand, you're asking for." This went on for 2.5 weeks. And then the priest came in and told me. And then I just went into convulsions, crying, screamed the hospital then. And then my dad came in and he just said to me, he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Tell me it's not true, tell me it's not true." I said, "Please tell me." I said, "Mary and Martina, they're okay." And he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Sorry." I said, "The priest had come in and tell me that Mary and Martina is dead." And he ran around the hospital looking for the priest. But I don't think the priest didn't have any intention. I don't think he meant to cause any hold or pain. It just
Yeah. And we have a clip here, Antoinette, of your mother just explaining from your mother and father's point of view of how they found out about this terrible, terrible loss. Stephen, do you have that clip there? This is Christine Keegan.
I was woke up at 20 to 4. My husband's at the running out of cabbies and turning around and saying, "The Stardust have to be born to the ground. Where's the girls?" I said, "They're not in." So I must be waiting up for them. I thought they were in the chipper. So he says, get dressed, we're going into Stardust. So I stepped out into where I got out. And when I went down, I nearly died. I nearly fell to the floor. As all you could see was all frames, the tubular chairs. And I went down to they told us all to go down to the police station. I went down to the police station. And he said, "You can go to City Morgue." When that happened first, I just went up to the hospital to see her, and I passed her bed. I didn't know her. She was all bandaged up, and her face was all black. And she called Mum, and she's just, "Mum," so I just seen her teeth, and I said, "There's Antoinette," to my husband. And I came back, and she said, "Where's Mary and Martina?" And I said, "Mary's in the maid, and Martina's in the mater."
Well, just it's impossible to imagine what your mother and father and you guys went through. Maris, Antoinette, could you just pass me over to Maris for a wee minute there, if you don't mind? Well, Maris, how are you? Thanks for joining us this evening.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to say congratulations to Antoinette on the marvelous award she got for her 40 years of never giving up, fighting for truth and justice all those years. Fair play to her. Deserves the award.
Yeah. Maris, you lost Caroline in the disaster. If you don't want to, you don't have to. And we haven't had a chance to chat to you over the last few days. Would you like to explain how you found out about what happened in Stardust and what happened the days and the weeks after?
Yeah, sure. actually what happened was we had been invited to a wedding in Manchester. My wife's uncle lived in Manchester, and his daughter was getting married, and we were invited to the wedding. And of course, Caroline was invited as well, but she didn't want to go because she wanted to go to the disco dancing thing with her friends. So our friends next door said, look, we'll look after Caroline, you go ahead to the wedding. So we took off in our car, travelled by boat, and drove up to Manchester. And we're staying overnight in our uncle's house, you know. So the next morning, anyway, everything went grand. There was great excitement in the house. We're all getting ready for the wedding. And we decided we'd leave the house, up to the local shopping centre. And within 10 minutes after that, her uncle arrived up to the shopping centre and told us there's a problem. He said there's after being a disaster in Dublin. There's a fire in a disco, and Caroline is missing. So we were absolutely devastated at this stage. So, as I said, there was great excitement in the house. We decided, look, what we'll do is we'll pack up and we go home and try and come back to Dublin as quick as we can. So we went into the Manchester shopping centre and we tried to book a flight home. I left the car there, tried to book a flight home. The only flight we gave was from a flight from Liverpool. So what we did is we drove down from Manchester to Liverpool. The flight wasn't until about 8 o'clock that night. And we had to hang around sort of Manchester trying to get a flight home, which we did. So eventually we got home at about 8 o'clock that night, 9 o'clock that night, and went straight down to the morgue. We were absolutely shattered at this stage. I met at the morgue, and they advised us that we'd better off not seeing our daughter because she's very badly injured. She had no hair and her legs were missing. And that they handed us a patch of her jeans, which had a comb that was melted, and her wallet. And she was tagged number 6. So there's no identification for her. So the only thing that Phyllis remembered was that she had a little hole in one of her teeth. And they went off and had a look, and they came back, and that was positive identification. And that's what happened to us. So after that, we decided, rightly or wrongly, after the funeral, and we had a visit from Charlie Haughey the night before the funeral, and we felt that he was shedding crocodile tears, to be honest. So Phyllis's aunt, Angela's daughter Mercy, she's dead now. She said to Charlie Haughey, "I think you should leave," you know. So up and off he went, you know. And then they tried to postpone our funeral. The following message, a message came up to say, listen, don't make any funeral arrangements because the Dáil Éireann have decided they're going to have a special mass for the deceased. You know, so here we are again, sort of being told what to do. Anyway, after all of that, we decided that Phyllis and I decided, look, what we'll do is we had good jobs, and we decided that we'd keep working, keep the head down, and try to get over the situation. But to this day, we never really did get over it, but we did bury ourselves in it. And then Antoinette was constantly ringing us to try and join the campaign. But we didn't do it for a long time. But we did eventually join about 2 or 3 years ago. And we joined it from the time of the postcard, the 48,000 postcard were getting signed. This is when we came on board then, and we campaigned with Antoinette and the rest of the families, of the Reeve families at the time.
Brilliant.
So here we are 40 years later, 40 years later, still waiting on the inquest to happen. I believe it's going to happen sometime in February.
Yeah, because even though I and many other people are congratulating you on the inquest, it would be far better if nobody ever had to go through this and there was no inquest because it never happened. But unfortunately, we're not there yet. Mars, could you just pass me back over to Antoinette for a little minute, if you don't mind, please?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you. Hi, Antoinette.
Hi.
Mars was just mentioned Charlie Haughey there.
Yeah.
The day after the Stardust Fire, the Stardust disaster, rumours were put out in government circles and in the media that this was a simple case of an arson, that somebody had purposely lit a fire. One of the revelers or disco goers had lit a fire in there, and that it was a kind of an accident, or at least it was that individual's fault and nobody else's. Do you want to elaborate on that for us?
I do, yeah, because at the time after the fire happened, I won't say I remember because I was in hospital and life support machine, but I do remember going through the media, like the newspapers and everything else. I recall like going through like videotapes that my father and my dad like recorded and everything else. And I found it very strange that Charlie High, the Taoiseach of our country, was actually standing on the crime scene the day after. And then he was standing in front of the media, and they were asking, like, do you know what happened? What's it? Any word of like, what's that happening? And he stood on, like, in front of the media and in front of a door, and he said, "Well, rumours is going around." He said it was arson. Rumours went around to suit them because it was actually an ideology, right? In their case, right, to protect themselves, right, because the Department of Environment would have been in trouble, and Dublin Corporation would have been in trouble, and the Taoiseach, the government would have been in trouble, the Attorney General, and then the owners. But what they done with us, right, back in 1981 was totally wrong, and even with the Keene Tribunal was wrong, insofar as, right, that they left the families high and dry of the deceased victims and left them, like, that they could go nowhere in relation to like any kind of a court case or any kind of a hearing, because when arson was put on the public record, there is no legislation against an arson. You can't go into court because 841 people in a room, in a building, and each and every one of them is branded arsonists. Like
Yeah.
my two sisters and the 46 victims that went to their grave, they were all classed as arsonists, and everyone that was in that building was arsonists.
Yeah. And over the coming few years, when the campaign started, over the years, most people involved in the campaign either accepted the other side's story, kind of met in the middle, even though meeting in the middle didn't establish the truth. And some other family members, as Mara said, just wanted to get over it, But there were two working class people who had lost two daughters and had a seriously injured other daughter, and they wouldn't give in. They couldn't be bought out. They couldn't be convinced. They knew that there was things being hidden about Stardust, and they wanted to bring it out. And that was your mother and father, John and Christine. What sort of a man was your dad?
See, my dad, right, when he was on the first committee, it was called the Stardust Relatives Committee, and like he would actually be talking, right, and say, "We're going to do this, we're going to do that," and the other members of the committee say, "Oh, John, don't, you can't do that, you can't rock the boat." And my dad couldn't handle this, right, and he just wanted to know what happened, right, like, no way was it arson. Like, he had been down in the Stardust, right, and he said, "Look, I don't even like to look this place," right, when he dropped my mother down for a ladies' competition. They were in the cabaret thing and they were doing a ladies' show, and he said, "I don't like to look this place," and like that's why he was so adamant, right, there's more to this, right, and he wasn't going to take no for an answer off anybody. So with the committee that he was on, the Stardust Relatives Committee, he just said, "Shag this now." He never cursed in his life, never did. As angry as he was, he never said any like language. He shagged this and shagged that, right? And that would be the most that my dad ever used. But his anger got built up so badly, right, that he just said, "Look, I'm getting off this committee," and he decided then to put it out into the media that he's going to set up a new committee. And he set up on the 5th of May 1985, and it was held in the Camilla Hotel on the Malahide Road here in Dublin. And hundreds of like injured and families turned up for the meeting. And my dad was unanimously elected as chairperson. Like everybody, like when he said what he wanted to do, right, and what he was going to do, right, like they just said, "Right, okay, we'll elect you as chairperson." So after, right, the meeting, he said, "Right, we're going to do loads of marches." So my dad done the marches, and there was hundreds turned up for the marches. Like it's on, I think today, tonight, like one of them programs. And like hundreds turned up with banners, right? They had all done the banners themselves, right? Painted things on like what they meant, like justice for their brother, justice for their sister, right? Truth, the whole lot. And anyway, that came to a halt because one day my dad was in the house, right? And we were all just sitting in there, and next to all the doorbell went. And I always remember, like, my dad had built a porch and the door opened from sideways rather than frontways because we lived in a corporation house and there used to be drafts coming in. So we decided to put the door on the side so the draft would go straight to the other end. But my dad opened the door and there was a big tall man there. And he said, John, can I speak to you? And he goes, who are you? And he goes, I'm the Attorney General of Ireland. So my dad said, come on in. So when he came into the house, right, we were all sitting in the sitting room, and there was two big tall guys were, and both of them had guns on each side of their trousers. And we're saying, like, what's going on here? So then my dad was taken out of the house and brought into a car, and he was gone for ages. And we're saying, please, like, we were actually like mad to run around and said, run out and get the registration of that car. So we got the registration. So when my dad came back then, like, he said, I have to call a meeting. And my mum said, like, what's it for? He said, like, they're going to make an offer, right? Because, like, we had been, like, with solicitors over the years, and there was no way of resolving any kind of compensation, right? Because arson was put on the public record. So what the government done was they sent the Attorney General out to meet up with my dad and make an offer of ex gratia payments. So my dad called a meeting then in the Camilla Hotel and told people, like, you know, you can go for it or you can go with the court. But the thing was, right, if you went to the court, and this is what was put to us, if you went to the court, you could lose your case because there's no liability after being accepted by anybody. And if you lost your case, you could lose your home. So basically speaking, people went with what the government threw. It was like throwing a carrot, like, there's a carrot in front of you, take it or leave it. And that's what happened. So when my father went in front of them, and the day, like, we went, it was under the Barrington Tribunal that was back in 1985, 86. And that's when the whole system was set up. And when he went before them, like, he told them that he had lost his two daughters and, like, he suffered mental stress and post-traumatic stress disorder. And the judge said to him, sorry, John, or Mr. Keegan, a man doesn't suffer. After losing his two daughters, man doesn't suffer. Case dismissed. Lost his case with the tribunal that was set up there to alleviate the problems with the families and the mothers and fathers that lost loved ones and the families and the survivors. So my dad said, right, I'm going to appeal it. Now, it was never about money. This was never about money. It was about, like, justice. Like, he had been told that he would be entitled to go before this court. So he appealed it and he went to the High Court. And then went into the High Court, he lost it and he appealed it, and then he went to the Supreme Court. But in the meantime, my dad was getting very, very sick, and he was diagnosed with cancer. So he was diagnosed in June. He had the operation in July. Then he went back in again in October. I had another operation, and that's when we got the bad news, right, that he wouldn't have long to live. So while my dad was at home, like, he didn't want to go to hospital, he stayed at home, right, and we had the palliative care from Our Lady, Harrods Cross hospice. They were over, like, looking after my dad. And as my dad passed away on the 18th of December, passed away at 2:30 in the afternoon, it was on Thursday, the solicitors knocked on the door to say, like, can we speak to your dad? And said, my dad, what's this about? Just saying that he's just lost his case in the Supreme Court. And just answered back, my dad's just after losing his life. Like my dad, like wouldn't let anything go, and if he had have like been alive, he would have went to the court of human rights. He always said, right, he would take it forward, that he was never going to let go, never.
But the reason for this, Antoinette, it wasn't a case that your dad was just angry. Your dad had reasons for this. There was conflicting information, wasn't there? There was people who witnessed fires on the roof, and yet a member of staff testified that there was a little fire inside. Do you want to talk us about, because your dad wasn't just pulling this out of the air, was he?
No, but see, back then, right, none of this evidence was there, but my dad hadn't got like his hands on it, right? But he knew there was something wrong. He knew quite well there was something wrong, that there was like evidence that was being withheld. Like he went into the company's office, and he searched through the company's office to see who was on the board of directors for the the Stardust, and for other companies that was there. And incidentally, he noticed, right, one person that was on it, right, which was a conflict of interest, and as you said, rightfully so, right, that suspicious minds. So when he went back to the old committee and he said, such and such a person's on it, and she has a vested interest in this, and this is a vested interest from a government party. And they said, did you get the evidence? And he said, no, you should have got printout. So my dad went in the next day looking for the printout, and it was all wiped off the record. So my dad said, right, there's something going on here, right? And he wasn't wrong. He was right. There was 33 outside witnesses, right, from the Stardust inquiry, the original Stardust inquiry, that was all excluded. Then there was witnesses from inside, right, that felt that he, at certain times, like Linda Bishop. Then there was the bouncer that made a call at 1:43 about a small fire in the sea, and that was at 1:43, small fire in the sea. And then there was a resident that was 220 yards away that noticed the fire earlier on. She noticed this earlier on from the roof, and because she heard no sirens going off, right, she didn't ring. She thought, oh, they're going to ring now shortly. So at 1:43, she decided to ring 999. So there was 2 calls logged to Dublin Fire Brigade, but for 37 years, there was only 1 call ever logged, or 1 call on public record. And then we brought it to the Department of Justice attention, and then we got Pat McCartan. Pat McCartan said if the lady is still alive, we confirmed that she made the phone call. But then Keane and Coffey, Keane was the original inquiry, the tribunal, the Coffey was the review, or the external investigation, and then McCartan was the last one. But he actually stipulated, right, that if she did make the call, then the 2 inquiries previous are wrong. So we got the lady, and we got her to testify, right, sign a statement that she did make the call. And this is where we're at now, right, because the inquest has been opened. Yeah. Because for 40 years, because it's still on public record, for 40 years almost, like that 99 call about the major fire in the roof space is still not on public record, because to this day, right, the government haven't acknowledged it. They haven't said, right, that they have seen it, because they have seen it. It's in the records. It's in the Keane Tribunal. It was in the transcripts. For the Keane Tribunal, it was in the transcripts for the Coffey process, and it was in the transcripts for the McCartan process. So the government knew they were there all the time. They knew that the Department of Justice knew they were there. The Taoiseach's office knew they were there. But they tried to pull wool over our eye, brush her under the carpet, and think we were going to go away.
Yeah. But there was also, it was common knowledge at the time that the owner of Stardust had a relationship with Charlie Haughey, and had the Stardust had connections with let's be straight about it, with the Fianna Fáil party at the time, which was the dominant party at the time. So when I come and I look at this from an outsider looking in at what your mother and father had to face these years, you were up against every agency and institution in the state. You were up against a political party that dictated and dominated and controlled Ireland for so long. And it eventually, as you said to me the other evening in our calls, you believe that it killed your father in the end, but your mother took up the fight after that. you want to tell us in 1985-6, you yourself, you told me you didn't want to know anything about it anymore. You actually had a fear that if your mother took on the campaign, what did you fear for your mother?
That she'd go as well. Like, I felt like it was, my ma takes over, right, because first of all, right, Mary and Martina was after being killed in the Stardust. Then my dad died over the Stardust. And I said to my ma, I said, when my dad passed away, Ma, why don't you just let go? And she goes, I can't let go. She said, I'll never let this go, right? I'll keep fighting this till the day I die. I'll use my last breath on a fighting for justice for my two beautiful daughters. And she always said it. And she done it. She done it, right, with great pride, right, and great dignity. She was, like, just so amazing, right, that I don't know where she got her strength from, because if it was me, I don't ever think I could do it. But she gave us all strength, and we're all going to carry on for her. But insofar as in the relationship with the Hotties and, like, the owners, that is true, because, like, investigations have proven that, right, in the words, right, if they never came home, in the book, right, research was done, right, and, like, even though they deny it, right, it's facts, right, there is a relationship there. And we believe, right, that they were protected from the state, and we were left like lambs to the slaughter.
Yeah. And your mother campaigned up until this year.
Yeah,
and she passed away in July. And as you say, it was only a few weeks later. Pity. But then again, you told your mother that she got the award anyway. But it's a pity that she didn't have full knowledge of the inquest and see the outcome of that inquest. Can I just turn to Mars for a little bit, if you don't mind, Antoinette? Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you, Mars? Thanks for having the patience with me. Mars, you said that you put your head in the sand, and that's a very understandable response, especially when you look at what the system that people were up against, the Stardust families were up against at the time. Over the 3 years you've got involved, how has that been for you? Has it been bringing up old memories? Do you feel that it's given you any strength? What's getting involved in the campaign like for you?
It's how can I find it difficult to answer that question, but what we did was we sort of buried our heads in the sand, if you like, for a long time. And it was only for Antoinette and Christine for perseverance that they got us involved in the sand. Once we got involved, then we were away with it, and we fought. We went on marches, and we went on protests, and we protested outside the door. We met the then Taoiseach Leo Raptor, who wasn't aware of what went on in 1981, and he was sort of taken aback by the information we'd given him. And then all of the relations got together and got the 48,000 cards signed to deliver to the Attorney General on a march from Beer Street Station to his premises, which he took in. And we waited and waited. We were promised he'd come back to us in June, July, August went by, September went by, and late October we had to do another demonstration outside his premises before he made the decision. And then he instructed the coroner to reopen the inquest. So, like, the pain of the loss of a child is extremely hard. It never, ever forget it. And even to this day, we still grieve over it, to be honest. Our daughter's buried up in Sutton, along with a lot of other young people that died in the Stardust. And we actually visit the grave every week without fail and keep it clean and tidy it up and all like that. So even at this day, like, it has taken a toll on us.
I know I'm going to put you on the spot now, John, but from all of your experience and the way you were treated after the event and families were treated, is there a message? Please God, nothing like this ever happens again, but if something did happen, is there something that you'd like to tell the government in terms of how better to treat people into the future? Is there a lesson that you'd like the government to learn from all this?
Yeah, I think they should listen to the people who pay their taxes and do all that sort of stuff, and they don't seem to be listened to at all. Because at that time, because we're from the north side at that time, we were sort of classed as uneducated people from the north side, which is not true. My daughter went to college. She went to Stephen's Green, Loreto College on Stephen's Green, and she was very well educated there. And she actually came and she worked with me for a long time with a contracting firm, and she was trained to be an estimator. And she's got on great, she's a great personality, and she's gone very well with everybody, you know. So,
so you think that the families weren't listened to? They weren't, like, I know that you weren't offered any counselling until a couple of years ago.
Yeah, they don't. I don't know what it is about them, but they seem to be a lot. I mean, most of the politicians are school teachers, you know, and you see them involved in building the children's hospital. They haven't got a clue what a brick is, to be honest. And they keep on, they get these building contractors in who are very, very experienced, and they might perform them. They put in these extra costs and delays of contract and all this business. So that's how
well, it would appear to me, even beyond that, they can't even connect with people when they have experienced a loss like you have experienced, and that says a lot in itself. Mars, first I'm going to move back to Antoinette in a minute. Can I thank you, Mars, for coming on the show tonight? I know it's short notice.
Thank you. Yeah.
No problem. And Antoinette, if I could just talk to you for a wee minute before we go.
Yeah.
It's been 40 years. You're going to pick up the award. It would be better if this never happened. But in terms of how you were treated by the government and your family were treated by the government over the last 40 years, is there any lesson that you'd like to tell the government they need to learn?
Yeah, there is something I'd like to say. I'd like to tell them, right, that, like, you know, that they can't treat people with such disdain. It's been like a tragedy, the biggest tragedy in the history of the state. And like, we were treated like, say, 39 years of systematic abuse from the Irish state, hidden in duplicity. They'd done everything they could do to hurt us. They rubbed salt into the wound. Every time we went back and gave them evidence, right, they said it wasn't. They actually put more hurt and pain onto our parents and loved ones, right, siblings, right, that should be still here, right, that lost all faith in the government, right, and what they were supposed to stand for, truth and justice and everything else, right. They actually hurt families, right, by hiding the truth from them and, like, doing this systematic abuse, right, which we have been sustainable. We've sustained, right, for 39 years, almost 4 decades. And this is what the state has done to us families. They have ripped families apart. They have torn families apart. The ripples of this disaster goes into 4 decades, 4 generations, right, which will never be, like, ever fixed, right, in our lifetime, because they just left us high and dry, never even gave us an ounce of counsel, never gave us nothing. They just thought, right, leave them, let them go on, let them move on, right. So they're only working class people, it's good enough for them. They didn't realise we're human beings like everyone else, and we were never going to give up.
Yeah.
And our day is coming, right, and the state has to stand up and say that they got it wrong, and they should have never treated us families the way they did.
Yeah. Well, I think that this evening, Caroline and Mary and Martina and John and Christine, your mother and father, I think they're all standing behind you and Maris tonight, because the strength that you have shown on this show tonight and over the last 40 years is phenomenal. Most viewers will have no idea what you guys have had to go through, and also the strength that you found from somewhere. I don't know where you found it. Maris and Antoinette, once more, I'm honoured to have you here tonight. Good luck in the future with everything, and I hope to have you on again as the inquest develops.
Thanks very much, Finbar.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time, guys. Okay, we're going to turn, we're over time as usual. We're not going to do a satire or a comedy monologue at the end tonight, because I just wanted to have a full story told tonight without cutting people off. We're just going to turn to our last guest tonight, the irrepressible Fintan Dunne. We're talking again about mother and baby homes. There doesn't seem to be any really positive stories or things that we can talk about these days in Ireland. It's quite sad in a way. We spoke to you last week, Fintan, about the mother and baby homes, the files. We spoke to Sheila O'Byrne, one of the survivors, another very, very strong character. But in the last week, as if you couldn't compound the insult anymore, they're bulldozing a mother and baby home grounds over the last week, and there's a possibility that the bodies of babies are being desecrated and that evidence is being destroyed. Do you want to fill us in on that there, Fintan?
Yeah, absolutely, Finbar. And it's not the first time they've done it, because they did this also when it comes to Bessborough, where bulldozers moved in the area around the Folly in Bessborough, where we know infant remains are, and they drove all over that area. So the recent example was in St. Patrick's Mother and Baby Home, Navan Road, Dublin, where there is a HSE centre now built on parts of that grounds, and they're putting a car park in, so in come the diggers. And it's just so distressing. And you have a video there of Sheila O'Byrne of Irish First Mothers, who was there to witness that with Mags, who's the daughter of Rose McKinney, who was in the Tuam Mother and Baby Home itself. And they witnessed this scene of these bulldozers tearing up the... Yeah, take a look.
Stephen, do you have that clip of what happened this week?
Hi.
Yeah. No, it's recorded.
Hi everyone. Hi, I'm Sheila. I'm one of the mothers from St. Patrick's 381 Mother and Baby Home, Navan Road, Cabra, Dublin. And I'm out here actually in the grounds with Margaret also. And we're here watching the diggers in the grounds and the bulldozers, and they're actually putting a car park here. But to me now...
That's something else, a car park. Vincent, there are two concerns about this, initial concerns anyway. The first one is that there may be bodies of poor babies there being desecrated with those bulldozers. And the second issue is that this could be a destruction of evidence. Do you want to talk to those 2 points separately, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's take the issue of evidence, because these are in effect crime scenes that we're talking about here, mass crime scenes where the crime of genocide took place. And you would imagine that 5 years into our government official inquiry of these issues, that we would have done at least ground radar surveys of these places to determine where the mass burial grounds might lie. But let's move really away from talking about it on a mass level, and let's talk about it on an individual level, like you saw there, where you have two people who are deeply affected by these issues witnessing these things. We have, for example, in relation to Bessborough, where they also did this, Anne O'Gorman of Irish First Mothers was in Bessborough, where at the end of a very difficult labour, she lost consciousness, but she says she heard the cry of her baby daughter, Evelyn, before she passed out. However, she was told subsequently that Evelyn had died. Now, where had she been buried? We have information which partially has been published, but mothers have spoken to people who are in a work capacity in these homes and who would have been responsible for maintenance and gardening. And we know that infant remains were passed out through windows at night. And those infant remains were taken away into corners of the grounds where they were buried with very little protection. Now, those kinds of infant remains are delicate. And in order to determine where they are, you simply need to do the appropriate surveys. But you'll notice we're not doing that. Instead, we continue to just treat these as potential redevelopment sites 5 years into a supposed investigation of these issues. We didn't have an investigation. We've never had one. We've had a minimal investigation triggered only by Tuam and because the government were under such pressure. And I would say I'm very affected by what I heard from Morris and from Antoinette Keegan today about the Stardust survivors and 40 years of abuse at the hands of the government. The mothers have been through 5 years of abuse. I can tell you, they're not going through another 35. We need answers. We need a complete change. And the ball is now in the court of Minister Roderick O'Gorman, who we will not hold responsible for the crimes of past governments, but who now has a clear responsibility to discharge here.
During the week, did Sheila, when they were making that video, did they say to anybody that's a foreman or somebody in charge of the dig or somebody in the building, did they ask what's going on here, and did they highlight that there may be a problem here? And what was the response if they did?
Well, there was a concerned response, and you will find, in fact, that the ordinary people of Ireland are deeply concerned about these issues. But what can the workman do but go and do what they're contracted to do? In fact, the HSE was approached with a view to perhaps putting a little plaque or memorial on the wall there in memory of the infants who had been buried in the grounds, and that approach was declined by them. They then went on to put a car park in the area. So this kind of disregard is very hurtful, and it's very distressing to survivors. You can imagine how distressing it is, as I say, for Anne O'Gorman, who is still searching for the remains of her baby Evelyn, and who is having to deal with this kind of attitude and this kind of scant disregard for answering what are legitimate questions. So,
what locality is that car park and those grounds? Where is that? I'm just wondering.
It would be near the boundary, and we still have boundary wall there in place at that location.
The location in Dublin itself, where is that?
It's near the Phoenix Park on the Navan Road there, as you head towards the Ashtown roundabout.
Now, I know you wouldn't encourage this yourself, but if locals decided to go down there and maybe give their own objections to what's going on at the moment and try to have it halted, I'm sure they might get some support from around the place for that. So if anybody's watching, I think at a minimum, it might be useful to go into that HSE building and highlight your disgust at the putting of a car park where there may be the bodies of innocent babies whose mothers are still looking for them today. Fintan, we're way over time. I don't want to cut you off quick, but we just do have those time limits. I want to have you back again very soon as well, Fintan, to look to see if there's any more developments with this particular thing, but also looking at the inquiry that should be coming out with the mother and baby homes soon. Thanks for joining us, Fintan Dunne.
Thank you. Thank you.
A thank you to our guests, Antoinette Keegan and Maris McHugh. A thank you to our production team, Stephen Kerr and Danny Parazier in Dublin, Stephen McDee or McDowell here in Dundalk, and his wife Michelle, who does my makeup. And boy, do I need makeup. Join us next week, 10 p.m. Thursday, folks. I'm looking forward to talking to you again. Night, night.